Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Hello, and welcome again to Down with D&D. I'm Sean Merwin, here with the affable and ever-brilliant Teo Sabadia.
Mr. Sean, how are you doing, my friend?
I am mostly... The neurons are mostly firing in the correct direction at this point, so we're going to
Sweet.
call that a small victory. When it gets
Yeah.
this close to the end of a year and the holidays, things start to kick in. Things start to shut down, not just business-wise in a lot of places, but also mentally for me specifically. So I'm going to hold it together today, though, I promise.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
That's what they tell me. I hear it everywhere I go.
Listen,
so-
we've got spiked eggnog or spiced, your choice.
right. Could I have both?
My kids are producing a steady stream of cookies.
Oh, well, there you go.
It is the most wonderful time of the year. Most of my shopping is done. I mean, pretty much all of it. It's actually just waiting for things to arrive.
Right. It's been a little
This-
different year for
Yeah,
that,
and this was
right?
the year that I tried really hard to not use Amazon.
Mm.
Which was rewarding emotionally, but you have to give everybody more time to send you stuff.
It is true. There have been a lot of boxes coming into the Merwin household, that's for sure. The cat loves it because the cat decides that every box that comes in, he's like a 30-pound cat, but anything shoebox sized or bigger, he is in it. And
Nice.
it's not pretty. But we do have some pretty news this week. Pretty news coming in from D&D. The first of which is yet another hire at Wizards of the Coast. Amanda Heyman joins Wizards of the Coast team as a senior designer on D&D, starting as of a week ago today. And Amanda began, or at least came into prominence in 2015 when she joined Paizo full-time as an assistant developer. And she came to my attention most recently when she became editorial director at Cobalt Press in July of 2020. And I thought, oh, what a great addition. And then not just a few months later, she is moving on to be the senior designer there.
That's great. Always nice to move to different opportunities. That's awesome. She's a great hire. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to see what work she does. I always lose track of what was, there are always hires that just sort of happen. And then there are people who sort of were the person who made it in through one of those hirings that we saw publicly and shared on the show. And I can never remember which is which. So I'm always curious, like, oh, did she beat out all this competition? Or was this one of these things where they're like, oh, this is an excellent fit? And I can never figure out which is which. But either way, this seems like a really good fit. I'm looking forward to it.
And I mean, what an exciting time to be getting into D&D at Wizards of the Coast, specifically with all the hype around the brand. So many opportunities to work on the role-playing game specifically, sure, but also branch off into different areas and work on sort of different projects. Very excited for her.
And then I'm thinking, oh, who's going to be at Cobalt Press?
Right, exactly, because
Tune in next week.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have a lot of stuff coming. They're in the pipeline right now. They've got the Southlands, and they have Meghan Markle over there, who is an incredible editor. So I have no fear that they can get the stuff done that they need to get done because they've done it before. But if they have a huge amount of work in the pipeline, it'll be interesting to see who they bring on to help with that. So the industry keeps on turning.
Indeed.
So tell me about the Adventurers League Feast of the Moon holiday event.
Yes, this is one of these fun events that they do on certain holidays. So Adventurers League has provided sort of small encounters that you can deploy during any normal adventure. It's just an extra thing you can throw in as a fun experience. And you can use this Feast of the Moon holiday event until January 4th. But you get an extra week, an extra 7 days, if you make any donation to or aid a cause, such as a children's hospital, so extra life counts, food bank, anything like that. There's a long list on the website of what you can do. So if you spend time, if you spend money, you get an extra week to run these things, which is kind of fun. And the first wave is a game called Wild Hunt. And in this event, everybody is going on a sort of game of hide and seek, and everybody gets a role. It's pretty creative. And you get special role powers if you're the hunter, if you're the prey. And it's sort of a mini game that you get to play in the wild, snowy wild. And then after you resolve it, everybody gets a Feyhound collar, which is an uncommon magic item that can create a green mist around you for 10 minutes, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Perfect for hiding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next, our friend DM David had a new blog post up on using the small world principle to build a better game. Now, this blog post came from a Twitter topic that had gone around for a while, and it's really good advice, not just for game designers, adventure writers, but also for fiction writers, where if you can use fewer NPCs, because rather than spreading out the awesomeness, you are concentrating the awesomeness into fewer NPCs that you have to remember. That gives the PCs more interaction with those NPCs, makes those NPCs feel more invested in the story, and gives the characters and the players a better connection to those NPCs.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really liked this blog post. It's one of those things that sort of isn't said loudly enough, even though a lot of us sort of think about it. And it made me think a step. He also talks about locations, though most of the blog is focusing on NPCs. And it made me really think about a problem that I've often struggled with designing, which is that, and this is true of most 5th edition adventures, where you kind of start out in what should feel like your home base and almost immediately leave it. Mm-hmm. But you're supposed to care about that home base. And everything takes you away from it when actually everything should be focused on it, right? And this happens in Rime of the Frost Maiden, right? We see this where it's all about saving the 10 towns. What's the first thing you do? Well, let's get out of the 10 towns, right? When are you coming back? I mean, every now and then we're going to sort of hand wave that. And that is a thing I think that our industry could do better of reflecting your home base and making it matter. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you can do that is by having these NPCs really stand out, because I think a lot of times the design is as if these NPCs are going to really be memorable and be visited often, when in reality you get very few minutes with them. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a bunch of them, it's even worse. It's even more diffuse of an experience. But if you concentrate those NPCs together, then they're more memorable over time. And especially if you give them ways to keep contacting, use things like the franchise rules, then it makes a difference, right?
Yeah. That brings me to The Mandalorian, which I'm not going to spoil, but the latest episode.
I can't believe he died.
Rather than bringing in a new NPC per se, right, a new minor character, they went back and reused an old one with all the tension that brings, all the story that rekindles, is a great point. So
yeah,
I didn't. I hope I didn't spoil anything there. But
no, you didn't.
Yeah, good storytelling tries to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, and you can, and he also discusses how you can have lots of NPCs, or you can have a number of NPCs that you cast out, sort of like throwing out a net. But then the ones that register, those are the ones that you then move plot points and information that the PCs are going to get. You concentrate it onto those NPCs that were of interest, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a great way to do that.
Absolutely. So thank you, DM David, for yet another interesting and informative blog post. And our final bit of news is James Introcaso's My Dad's Monster Manual. This is such a cool idea. And I've seen a preview copy of it, and James absolutely nailed it, along with his father, of course. So if you don't know, what James Introcaso did was he took the Monster Manual from Wizards of the Coast and showed it to his father and said, okay, Dad, what are these creatures? What's the story behind each of these creatures? And then he took his dad's reaction and rewrote the monster based on that. So in some cases, they're pretty close together. But you see things like the Mind Flayer or the Beholder, and those things get a really cool rewrite based on what James's dad thought that they would be. And this is, like I said, this is just such a great idea. And one of the cool things that you can do as a DM, one of the biggest tools that you have to keep your players guessing and to delight them and to terrify them, is to take what they think something is and change it. So if they have a company of hobgoblins marching in, giving one of them some non-standard thing, just take some other totally random monster and make that monster stat block fit this hobgoblin. Even if you have to give them, a magical staff to do something that the monster that you took could do, it keeps them on their toes. It makes this a more non-boring game.
Yeah.
And this is what James did with this My Dad's Monster Manual, because now you have all these monsters and you can do something totally different with them.
Yeah, it's really fun. Someone on Twitter today had this idea where you suddenly throw your players into what seems like an alternate reality where all of the monsters are from My Dad's Monster Manual.
Right.
And so they're like, wait, it looks like a Beholder, but it's not. Or
Right.
So every monster would be different until they, do something and can get back to their normal reality. But I thought that was a really great idea.
I mean, even today, James put up a preview with the owlbear.
Yeah.
And so his father saw the picture and said, well, obviously has some owl features, but it's a bear. And so the story that he puts behind it makes it a little bit more of an intelligent creature, something that you can talk to and rationalize with. And so you could totally do that in your game without having to do an alternate reality or anything. You can just say, there is this owlbear, but he maybe talks to you.
Yeah.
And that, again, just twists what a longtime player would expect and makes the encounter and the story you can tell much, much cooler.
And two fun ways you can do that is any kind of exposure to magic could cause a creature to be different, right? So you could give it an origin story. It's a little bit like a superhero type take, right?
Right.
The other idea is to have an intelligent magic item that somehow interacted, right? Like what if the owlbear swallowed an intelligent dagger? Right. Or I think it's some Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage has a thing with a sword, an intelligent sword that kind of binds with a creature in a really fun way.
Yeah.
So those kinds of ideas are good ways to explain how a monster can behave atypically, right?
Yep. So that is available as of, tomorrow of our recording, but it will be available by the time this show drops. And if you would like a discount, you can subscribe to Mr. Introcaso's mailing list to get 25% off. So check it out on the DM's Guild. It is My Dad's Monster Manual.
Yeah, 80 new stat blocks and just the cutest thing ever.
Yep. And going from the cute to the mechanical, we are going to dig into the next part of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which today we will cover the Bard's new optional class features and subclasses.
So, Sean, I thought we were skipping Tasha's this week.
Were we?
Yeah. I mean, I'm good either way.
Well, I think we should just do the Bard.
Hit the Bard? Let's do the Bard.
We'll hit the Bard, and then we will hit... we tried to do too much of Tasha's last week is essentially what happened.
We love all things.
We do. We just want to talk about everything. So the pretty thing in front of us at the moment is what we're going to talk about. But I'm going to be a taskmaster, and we're going to do one of each.
All right.
So here we go with the Bard. The three optional class features. First, at level 1, you get 15 additional Bard spells. 2 of those spells being from Tasha's new spells. And I didn't see anything too...
nah, it's fine.
Yeah, too out of control about that. Some of them obviously should be Bard spells because they're very, mind control-y, social sort of spells. So it's all good there. The spells are already in the game. What's
Yeah, I mean,
what's
these
one
are.
more?
I have a love hate and a don't care. Generally,
Right.
I'm like whatever, it's fine. But I also worry when you encroach on areas that, like I know there are a number of clerics that with great pride use the aid spell,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's a very powerful spell to use to kind of pre-heal your party. You give them maximum additional hit points above their maximum.
Mm-hmm.
And now the bard, any bard can do this, right? Not just a type of bard, but if you allow for this optional class feature, all bards now can aid as well.
Yeah.
And now that's great if you don't have a cleric, but if you do have a cleric, it kind of, encroaches on their territory. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I would think about as a DM. It's a little,
Right.
okay, it's a thing to think about.
I mean, let's just say it out loud. Role-playing games, especially like D&D, they are complicated machines. And when you mess with the machine that's in front of you, there are consequences. Maybe consequences are enjoyment and efficiency go up 80%. Maybe it's the whole game breaks down depending on your particular situation. So, anything you change, you need to then step back and reflect on what that change has meant to your game.
Yep. Absolutely.
At level 2, magical inspiration is an optional class feature. So if a creature has your bardic inspiration die and casts a spell that restores hit points or deals damage, that character can roll that die and add to the resulting restored hit points or dealt damage.
Ooh.
Yeah, So there is a subclass currently called the College of Valor that the Bard has. And one of the benefits of that class specifically is the inspiration die given by the College of Valor Bard can be added to the weapon attacks of the character spending that die.
To the damage, yeah.
Yeah, to the damage. And I'm like, okay. It's a subclass. It's something that, especially people that crit a lot, they will hang on to that die because then, when you're rolling that extra D8 and you crit, you can roll it twice and hey, double the cool. Great. So this to me, if anyone can do this, what does it say about that College of Valor subclass? Yes, it is a little different. And so I would have rather seen this feature added to a specific new subclass.
Yeah.
Right.
I just feel like this dealt a blow to the College of Valor because when I've played with I've played with a number of College of Valor bards over my days of 5e, and this is one of the things that they're like, you can add it to damage too.
Right.
And everybody's like, oh, awesome, exciting. And we just took that away from them. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
You're not special anymore.
And you can see what they were trying to do, obviously, by saying, well, you can add this to healing or you can add this to spell damage. So it's different, but it's the same enough that it does sort of take away a bit.
Yeah.
So again, it's, if you want it in your game, great. I think the flavor of it's cool. I just would have rather seen it as a specific thing for a new subclass, like College of the Arcane or something like that, rather than here. At level 4, you get Bardic Versatility. Each time you gain a level with an ability score improvement, you can replace a skill with replace the skill that you have your expertise in, or you can replace a cantrip that you can cast with one that you want to be able to cast. Again, overall, who cares, right? It's not that big a deal. A player doesn't like a cantrip they have. Okay, good. Though I've never used this skill, even though I took expertise in it. Can I change? Sure. Not a big deal. It's just these sort of retconning abilities, as I like to call them, where you get to change something that you've already had. It's sort of a double-edged sword for me. If you're fixing a problem with gameplay, that's fine. If you're changing it to rebuild because you can now power game, this skill is really important at low levels. This score is really important at high levels. So I'm going to switch out. That isn't so good, only because if you look at the story as a narrative, look at the game as a narrative engine, you are breaking that to me. You are saying, I am now a completely different character, and it's not completely different, but it's different enough in terms of the narrative stability that you've been building throughout your campaign.
It's literally the spell the skill you focused on
Mhm.
suddenly you completely unfocus on it and you focus on something else. It's
Yeah.
kind of strange, right? It
Yeah.
is, yeah. But
So-
I mean, game wise, I understand why it exists, because sometimes you find it, and I've had this happen in a campaign where there were 3 characters that all could deal with traps,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden 2 of them died. And now it was like, oh, actually, the person who was pretty good at traps now needs to be very good at traps.
Yep.
Well, can I find a way to boost that up? And this might work, right? And you have those types of situations. So it's okay. It's that danger that it shifts from being a one-off addressing of a problem to the default.
Right.
And that is what in people's brains overall, it's not like the one player, but overall, players begin to just tinker with their builds at different levels to maximize. It's like if you could change your ability scores
Mhm.
every level, you would always have even numbers.
Yep.
Right? Constantly. And you would constantly move your feats around, and you would just, why not get another +1 out of it, right?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to try to use rules to fix a problem that you could just fix as the DM by saying, yeah, go ahead and change that.
Yeah.
But like, as you said, if you formalize it as a rule, it holds more weight than it should.
Yeah.
So I would have rather just seen the sidebar that it says, hey, if your player is not having fun with their character, let them change small things so they are.
And come up with an in-world reason for it.
Exactly.
Here's some examples, which we already saw earlier in the book, and so we're good.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a little too formal for me, and we'll see how it feels to people over time.
Right, but again, it is a formal game, yeah. So sometimes there does need to be those formal rules. So we'll, like you said, we'll see how it goes. There are 2 new Bard colleges. First is the College of Creation. The cosmos began as a song, and you can tap into the power of this song to create.
Man, I just saw like some sort of hair metal video in my mind.
Right. So I love this idea in terms of the flavor and fun, right? There's this song of creation, and you Bard, you can manipulate that song. I love the flavor. I love what you could possibly do with that. And then I read the mechanics and went, oh, no. Oh, please, no. And this is just a personal opinion. It is the hardest thing to do in D&D in game design is to create classes.
Yep.
The second hardest thing to do is create subclasses, as far as I'm concerned. And so, I'm going to complain about this. Some people are going to love it, and that's great.
Sure.
So did you want to talk about it overall, or do you want me to dive into
Nope, dive into it.
Okay, so at level 3, you get the emotive potential. When you give an inspiration die, the use of it gives additional benefit depending on how it was used. So if the person used it for an ability check, they can roll the inspiration die twice and take the higher. It's basically you have advantage on your inspiration die. If they use it to bump up an attack roll, they can also take an attack of enemies within 5 feet of it. Okay, the creature they attacked and enemies within 5 feet of it make a con save or take thunder damage equal to the die of the roll. So, boom, the song explodes super loud, and people around it, around the target, take damage. And if they use it to add to their saving throw, the user gains temporary hit points equal to the inspiration die roll. Ideas, good. Way too much. Way too much.
I mean, I'm already feeling like bards will often be, the player of a bard will often have a little card to tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. That card just already is big, and we're on number 2.
Right.
And even trying to write up how the attack roll benefit will work for somebody. Oof.
Yeah, it's right, because the player who's using this inspiration die doesn't know your con save, right? Doesn't know any of this information. So not only do you now have to, as the bard, have to remind the person, hey, don't forget you have your inspiration die. Now, Oh, don't use it on your ability check because you can use it on your attack roll later and do thunder damage to all of these. It's too much. And if you love the super tactical game, then this is great, right? If you want to think through all these things and everybody at your table is super into that, then this is the subclass for you. If you don't, it's not.
Yeah. And did you cover the saving throw one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They gain temporary points.
Yeah. So it's just, this is a lot. This is what I would say is inelegant design. And as you said, I have all the respect in the world for anyone writing a subclass. It is exceedingly hard to try to make it feel new, refreshing, fun. And this is fun, but to me, this is inelegant. It's going to slow things down at the table. It's going to cause people to want to optimize. It's like having 5 items on the grocery shelf and you have to choose one. It's so much easier when there's just a thing and you're happy with it. Right. This menu of options is too much. The other thing is, I'm so far feeling like both of the classes have had subclasses that feel to me heavily like 4E, but without 4E's elegance. Like this is like, it's these big superhero concepts, right? Like when I give you my inspiration die, there's this song hanging in the air, this magical power that's inexplicable, and we just have to sort of accept it. It's very grandiose. And not everybody likes that in their game, that sort of big, when I play an instrument chord, there's a visible power thing somewhere around, and then it's unleashed, and it can either be this or that. Like there's a lot of disbelief here. In how this works. Yeah. And when you combine that kind of, it's a little bit hard to believe, it's a little super magical, and it's hard to use, I think ideas can fall apart. It's one thing if it's efficient, but
right. Yeah. That's it lacks that efficiency. It lacks a little bit of the elegance to get like you said, to get across the idea and make it mechanical in a way that is best for the game.
Yep.
So at level 3, then you get Performance of Creation. You can use your action to create a non-magical item with a value equal to 20 times your bard level in gold pieces. You can do it again after a long rest, or you can use a spell slot to refresh this ability, and the item will disappear after a number of hours equal to your proficiency bonus. Again, I love the idea of this. You can create things out of thin air, but to try to put rules on that is maddening, because now you have to flip open the player's handbook. Oh, can I create this thing that is, I'm a 7th level bard. Let's see, 7 times 20, 140. It's got to be worth 140 gold pieces. Well, what if I want to create something that's ordinary but not in the player's handbook, or not in any book? It's trying to put rules on something that is just so wide open that it's just hard to do.
The other thing is, it doesn't say, so I have 2 big thoughts. One is, I generally find characters have everything they need. Like the way these backpack kits are given to 5e characters, everybody has rope, everybody has light, everybody has a utility thing or 2. It's seldom that someone goes, oh, I don't have rope or I need it. Whereas that used to happen in previous editions, right? Where you didn't have things and encumbrance was tracked more often. And so it all kind of mattered more to have the ability to just conjure up an item. I don't know that it's super kind of useful. And then the second thought is there a size limit?
There is.
Oh yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, we'll get to that in just a second.
Because that's the thing I would most want, are the things that are bigger. So I'd see it's large at 6th level,
right?
Huge at 14th level,
right? And so I've played games where that are very rules light, where the rules would just say, "Hey, you use this magic and you can create an item. You can create a standard item," and then just let the DM decide what that is, or the game master. And D&D is not that kind of game, but I want D&D to move toward being that kind of game where the cool flavor of the class, the story behind the subclass, is held up by a way to handle things narratively where there isn't a bunch of rules and book flipping involved. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong for wanting that. Maybe that's not what a majority of D&D players want. But if I'm in the minority, I think it's got to be a pretty large minority.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm also not sure. Could it be like a kit related to like a tool, or is it a single thing?
You're talking about what this does?
Yeah, like can I use Performance of Creation to create an alchemist kit?
Probably not.
Probably
Because that's not a single item.
Yeah, it's not a single item.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
and it says, for examples of items you can create, see the equipment chapter of the player's handbook, but it doesn't say you can only create things. So,
yeah,
I like it. I just want it to be, I want the rules to give the DM permission to say yes and no. And I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if D&D is that game at this point in its development.
It's hard to think through what is the right balance for it, because you don't want it to be a useless third level ability. Mm-hmm. And I'm torn in many ways. Like in some ways, I want to create 200 gold pieces worth of stuff or whatever my level is, 5 times blah, 20 times on my bard level. So because in some ways what would be cool is if I could give everybody a climbing kit, right? Mm-hmm. Or because those are things that are very useful,
right?
And have that balance sort of work out, or create an actual alchemist kit because it's worth of material or something. Mm-hmm. Why when I'm magically creating it does it have to be a single item versus that much gold pieces worth of stuff? But then of course if you make it super useful, maybe that gets in the way. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's part of the problem is not the way this is written. It's just the game itself. The game itself does not model well on just do anything you want,
mm-hmm.
Which is why things like wish spells are so problematic sometimes. Because this is just a kind of a low level wish, right?
Yeah.
I wish I had this particular item right now, and we all know the problems of those sorts of rules. But anyway, we need to continue moving on with the 6th level feature, which is animating performance. Whew. So before I even get into this, if your feature takes 4 paragraphs of detailed rules plus a stat block, you may want to rethink how it's presented and what it does. So I'm going to try to get through this as succinctly as possible. As an action, you can take a large or smaller non-magical item that you can see within 30 feet of you and animate it. The animate item then uses the dancing item stat block, which is provided, which also uses your proficiency bonus. The item is friendly to you and your companions and obeys your commands. It lives for an hour or until reduced to 0 hit points or until you die. Okay, so you're making this item that dances around. In combat, it shares your initiative count, but it takes its turn immediately after yours. Okay. It can move and use its reaction on its own, but the only action it can take on its turn is a dodge action, unless you use a bonus action to command it to take a different action. All right. Okay. I'm still there. I'm still okay. That action can be one in its stat block or some other action, it says. Oh, okay. So it can either take an action or any action. I don't know what that means, but okay. Now, if you are incapacitated, the item can take any action of its choice, not just dodge. Wait, this throws me completely. So it can only use dodge unless you command it, unless you're incapacitated, and then it can do anything it wants. Why can't it do anything it wants?
I guess the idea is it's always looking for your commands. And if it doesn't get them, then it thinks on its own.
Yeah.
Is the concept, right? But it's it's a lot of words for does it matter?
But wait, there's more.
Give me more.
If you use your Bardic Inspiration feature, which is a bonus action, you can command the item as part of that same bonus action that you use Bardic Inspiration. So it's like,
whoa.
Yep. So I understand why they're doing this, right? They don't want you to have to choose between giving a
Right.
Bardic Inspiration die and commanding your thing. So you can do both, but that's just one more rider on top of things. All right. So once you animate an item with this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. You can only have one item animated by this feature at a time. If you use this action and already have a dancing item, then the first one immediately becomes inanimate. So there's a whole lot of things there to get to. You can animate an item and it attacks.
Yeah. So there, I've got a number of things. One is, do we really need to have it summon a creature? Because summoning creatures already slows the game down.
Right.
And should be done very carefully. I don't love that it can be large. I don't like things taking up a lot of space on battle maps and so on.
Yep.
So that's a thing. It's large or smaller, but I don't really love the fact that it can be large. That takes up a lot of space. It also has a always on aura type thing. When any creature starts its turn within 10 feet of the item can increase or decrease the walking speed of that creature by 10 feet per turn. Mm-hmm. This is, it's more to track. I almost rather this were not a thing,
right?
An actual stat block, and that it was just like an attack you get, some sort of benefit you get.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree. I agree. I want it to be elegant. I want it to catch the flavor of this while still being simple. And, you know, even if it was just a stat block, I could almost get behind that. The stat block itself, like you said, I don't want it to do all of the things it does. Like you said, that whole slowing down a creature within 10 feet of it, or speeding up a creature within 10 feet of it. So there's one more choice to make. And all I can think of is, okay, I'm like a 5th level artificer, 6th level bard with this college, and then, you know, a 4th level druid. And so I've got, you know, my cannons, I've got my dancing items, I've got my animal companions.
So like here's a question. Can I use this thing because it has fly? Can it just fly me around? Right? Can it grab me and fly me around? Yeah. Can we use this irrepressible dance to overland move faster?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's just lots of stuff that, like, this became it's a lot. It's a lot more than it even seems to be. And it can bring up these questions that are sort of annoying because it's so much to it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, you know, and in many ways, it's not like we're maybe being a little, you know, we're being picky. We're analyzing this stuff, but and I'm sure someone can play this in a campaign and it's all good.
Right.
But when it comes to, you know, we're talking about adding things to the core of the game. Mm-hmm. And I think this feels a little too far away from core for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's super mechanical. It's like what we talked about with the optional features. Right. It becomes a much more tactical game. And if you love that, this is for you. But as part of the, like you said, Teos, as part of the core game, it's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And at level 14, you get creative crescendo. When you use your performance of creation feature, you can create more than one item at once. The number of items you create equals your charisma modifier. If you create an item that would exceed that number, you choose which ones will disappear. So it's just you can make more than one, but you're no longer limited by the gold piece value when creating items with performance of creation. So you can create a 100,000 gold piece item that will disappear after 14 hours.
Can you create a component for a spell?
Exactly. Is that
so platinum bowl time? Can I Heroes Feast every day with creative crescendo?
Yeah,
because Heroes Feast is now on my bard levels, on my bard spells, as a way to make Mike Shea really happy.
Right.
So then did I just get a free platinum bowl for Heroes Feast?
Yeah, it's the wish problem at a smaller level.
This is also one of those things that if I don't use it to break things, like creating free Heroes Feast components, it's sort of like, well, what am I doing? So am I now, let's say my charisma is, +4. Am I creating 4 backpacks for people or 4, like, is this really a level 14 benefit?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm being really reasonable and not doing anything crazy, then I feel like this is really weak. Like, hey, everybody, I don't know. I made you all cups of coffee. Oh, wait, that's 2 items. I made 2 of you cups of coffee. 1 cup, the coffee.
Yeah.
Enjoy. I don't know what I would do with this feature.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if as the DM you don't want it to be broken, it sort of becomes weak for a level 14 thing. And if you let it get too out of hand, like, oh, I'm going to make a 10,000 gold piece diamond.
Yeah.
Here. I just bought.
All right.
Oh, it disappears. So anyway, next week we will talk about the other subclass because I want to get into Icewind Dale.
And the next one is going to be the college to which you and I belong.
That's right.
Hello. How do you say that?
Eloquency.
Yeah, Eloquency.
The College of Eloquency, which we will talk about next week. But now we are going to go into the Frozen North and cover more of these exotic locations set forth in Icewind Dale.
Spoilers.
Rime of
the
Frost
Maiden. So Mandalorian, what happened was... No.
All right. So if you are playing Rime of the Frost Maiden and you do not want to hear about these locations, now's the time to check out. Thanks for listening. But for those of you interested in what we think about these places of interest, hang around. We've covered 6 of them, I believe. So let's get into the next one, which is Yaral Moot. So the tall tale that leads you here is frost giants ruled this land long ago. Their leader, the Jarls, would meet atop a hill to the west to settle disputes. Their thrones still rest on that hill. Do you want to talk about what the quest?
Yeah, the quest is really interesting. A frost druid, Yselm Bloodfang, is actually in league with Oral. And so her only reason to lead you here is so that you will die. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the text doesn't say to you is, hey, what if you figure out that she's lying to you?
Right.
Which is really kind of important.
Yeah.
I actually think that's totally cool. And I wish that there had been a little bit about this, because one of the things that happens is you have this sort of like, oh, frost druids, they can be bad or good or whatever. And they're following Oral. This is a great opportunity for them to learn about the frost druids and Oral. And I think it'd be really cool to have Yselm just say straight up, like, if you realize she's lying, she's like, well, I had a vision that you should go there. And but you sense that there's more to it, and then you press her, and she's like, "So you would die. It's your role. I have seen it. You must go there and die, right?" And just no bones about it. It's the way it should be,
right?
Like, I think that would be actually kind of cool.
And she's not necessarily going to kill you. She just knows that if you go there, you're going to die, and she thinks that would be awesome if that happened.
Just doing what her goddess has told her should happen, right? It's very matter of fact. And I'm in a world where we do sacrifices on Tuesdays, so
Yep. So exactly. So hey, let's march off. And of course, all these cool things are going to happen 3 times a month.
Yeah, that's the other big thing here. And whether you use a tall tale or a quest, you really need to take into account the fact that nothing works unless you have a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to somehow the tall tale should really include that. Their thrones still rest on the hill, and on a full moon, strange things can happen. Add that little bit. Or Yselm tells you to go there and only go on a full moon.
Right. And if you are like most games, you really don't care about the phases of the moon unless you have a lycanthrope in the party. So you can always just say, oh yeah, and by the way, of course, it is a full moon on the night you're there.
Or have some sort of other thing, like, nothing's happening, but you somehow realize this is tied to the moons. And by the way, here's another fun thing to do that's right next to it.
Mm-hmm. Also be warned that you probably want to be 5th level, 4th or definitely lower, that this is going to be pretty tough. For example, characters are likely going to be vulnerable to cold damage because that's a feature of the area. And the giant that comes to attack them, its stare does an average of 70 points cold damage if you include that vulnerability per round on a failed DC 13 con save. So
That's
unless your characters have, at least 70 hit points, if they fail their save, this is going to be pretty tough. So you want to give us the story of Yaral Moot?
Yeah, so there are 7 huge giant thrones sitting on this hill, and on a full moon, their apparitions show up, and I guess they kind of have meetings. It's like, if you were tied to your office and forced to come back as an apparition on it. When you show up, one of the things that's sort of bizarre is the text specifically says the giants don't talk to you. Why would you limit interaction? But okay. So I would just undo that and have them, issue a challenge and, you are not of our kind. Only the strongest may pass, something like that. But the idea is that the leader of these, the Jarl of the Jarls, will summon a frost giant skeleton, which, by the way, there is a WizKids mini for it, and challenge you. And if you win, congratulations, you get 2 invisible stalkers who also show up and beat you up. And if you defeat those, then one of the thrones rises and a staircase is revealed underneath. Mm-hmm. But that may not be all the fighting.
Yeah.
So the Frost Giant Skeleton is a fun fight. It's an easy level fight. The 2 CR6 Invisible Stalkers is a deadly fight. Mm-hmm. But if they were sent here by the Druid, at this point, she attacks with a Winter Wolf that is summoned by Oral. That's a hard fight on its own. So easy, deadly, and hard all in a row. And we haven't even gotten into place yet. So that's a good reason to be, and all of these difficulties are based on being level 5. So it is as challenging just for level 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then if you get through all of that, the throne that covers the secret entrance to the dungeon slides back, giving you access. And when you go down into it, there is a short puzzle to open a gate to continue further in the dungeon. The braziers have runes, and there's a poem telling you what you need. So as long as someone speaks Dwarvish or can cast a spell, they can read this. If they don't, then figure out what you need to do to get this information to your party. I like puzzles like this. It's sort of one of those, the poem has items, so you just need to find those items and put it into the brazier. I love these because they make the players feel smart, but they're not very hard at all. It's not going to take 2 hours and a knowledge of, Victorian literature to figure out the puzzle. It's just a cool, neat little thing to give your characters and their players a little bit different interaction with the game as opposed to the 3 combats you probably just had.
And I love that the flavor of the puzzle is really fitting with the location, all about these frost giants. There are giant runes involved and cool runes that represent things that would be used by giant kind. They give you images of the giant runes. So it's really good stuff. Love this.
Yep. And the little dungeon itself, it's pretty small, not too overly complex. You just need to sort of find a key here and there to unlock the next room. And so what happens inside is sort of less important than what happens when you leave. There is a Horn of Blasting in the dungeon, and it is being guarded by 6 flying swords.
Yeah, and there's a trick about which key you use. So there's a key in the lock of the chest.
Right.
But if they did the puzzle before, they found an extra key. Mm-hmm. So they might think, and what they're supposed to do is kind of go like, this chest is trimmed with silver, but it has a gold key. So they're supposed to go, okay, I'm going to remove the gold key, put in the silver key, then you get the treasure, which is here for people to claim. And then you would put the gold key back to leave, and it creates a portal.
Yep.
And sort of unnecessarily, when you exit the portal by using the gold key, you have a swarm of ravens attack the character, and until 4 swarms have been there. And I'm like, do we really need that? I mean, it's flavorful, but there's a lot of attacking going on. Yeah. So I don't know that I would add that. Yeah, and then you've got your next part.
Right. Well, it's sort of weird. The map, the the text says if they use this key, this portal opens and they can leave, but it doesn't show on the map that exit. I don't think so. You're not quite sure where they come out or how they would get back in, and all of that, like you said. Then the ravens attack, and then as they are trying to leave, a frost giant who is coming to prove herself and wants the horn that the characters likely found as a sort of rite of passage to rule her group. So there's a CR8 fight after probably many, many fights already. And again, when you're in that circle of thrones, I believe you have vulnerability to cold damage. So there's more damage that's likely to come from the frost giant.
Yeah. So if you like, I mean, I love a lot about this encounter. It's really cool. It's a bit hard, so you have to watch that. And I think there's some little minor bits to keep an eye on, but it can be very, very fun location.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you add a little bit of interaction, a little more interaction, like you said with the ghosts, have the ghosts mention the horn. That then gives a little anticipation to not just what the characters find, but what this frost giant will be looking for when they come in.
Yeah, and even when the frost giant arrives, I think for her to just say, like, look, sort of, this is the way, right? I must fight you. I have come to prove myself. I can't go back to my tribe without having fought you for the horn you carry.
Right.
You were not supposed to be able to enter and remove it. I have to do this. And I could see a fun situation where you defeat her but spare her life and use her later, right? Like have her come and maybe help the PCs, right? That could be fun.
Exactly. Or hand over the horn.
Yeah.
Say, here, now you rule your clan. We're going to be coming to you for favors later.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's a great role playing, and it's a great tool that you can have both for storytelling and mechanically later.
I love it.
The next location. This is an interesting one. Even pronouncing it's going to be interesting. Carcolok, the tall tale that leads you to Carcolok. What Peos calls peace out or gnome diplomacy. So, the tall tale: goblin scavengers prowl the tundra on the backs of wolves or in wagons. They also like to ambush travelers on the 10 Towns Trail on the side of the mountain pass. Well, a group of trappers found the goblins' fortress in the mountains. Someone should go there and wreck it. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, it's your typical standard. There's a goblin threat. Let's go take care of it. The truth is a little bit different.
Yeah, and the quests are that a goblin messenger was captured in Bryn Shander carrying a letter calling for peace and asking the sheriff to send negotiators to arrange a treaty. Mm-hmm. The sheriff doesn't trust the goblins and says, hey, bring me back the head of the goblin chief, Yarbnock. Mm-hmm. You could also end up in this location if you do the Foaming Mugs quest we covered in Chapter 1 and you follow the goblin wagon back rather than attacking it immediately. Mm-hmm. And the last link is you can find a Shield Guardian's amulet in the Lost Spire of Netheril, which we'll cover later. Mm-hmm. And that can lead you to this Shield Guardian here, which makes me think immediately, why do we keep giving player characters Shield Guardians?
Yes, it's a whole other episode. So the location known as Carcolok has a secret. The goblin leader ain't a goblin. Which is cool. I love that.
It's great. This is great.
The goblins don't know it, but their chief Yarbnock is really a gnome. Spellix Ramwad. What a great name.
Yeah.
So what happened was, according to the adventure, while crossing one of the passes of the Spine of the World, the goblins dropped an avalanche on Spellix's party. And Spellix was buried but not found, whereas the rest of his group was taken by the goblins back to their lair. Now, Spellix decided to go after and try to rescue them. And that's where things get a little weird. I don't even know how to best describe this. He created sort of a goblin suit out of metal and went in, and so long story short, he sort of became their leader. And once he became their leader, he sort of got interested in them. He also found a strange egg-shaped crate, and that he's trying to open. So this is where it gets weird, because the text sort of says, yeah, he went in and he became interested in the goblins and started to really care for them. And he really didn't like his companions anyway, which implies that they were killed.
Yeah, they were eaten. It says somewhere that, like, one by one, they were all eaten, and he just kind of keeps ruling the tribe.
Yeah.
I didn't like him that much.
Yeah, so after doing all this stuff to go rescue them, after he was buried in an avalanche, he just decides, they're tasty, I guess. I don't know. That's a hard sell for me as written. I need to change that a little bit, because especially if the characters are going to parlay with Spellix, I don't need them finding out that he basically let his former companions be eaten, because that's sort of less of a
I think the easiest
sympathetic
way
figure.
I think the easiest way to address it would be that he arrives and tries to set it all in place, and then realize they were already eaten.
Right.
And then he thinks about, I'm going to go on revenge, but actually feels sorry for them.
Mm-hmm.
And through both the combination of, like, well, I'd have to flee and that would be dangerous, but I also feel bad for him, has ended up staying, right? But now that things are going wrong, because the rhyme is here and it makes it difficult for the raiding to go well, he is trying to think about maybe escaping and rejoining human society. But it is a sort of strange fit, because it is kind of like, how did you make peace with the fact that you've been directing all these goblins to actually raid caravans and so on, and now that the hunting has slowed down, caravans have slowed down, now you want to rejoin human society?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little odd. So you, as the DM, need to sort of figure out what exactly Spellix personality is, what exactly his motivations are, so you can present that in a way that the characters won't just want to kill him as soon as they find out.
Or lean into that and make him despicable, right?
Okay, that's fine too, right?
Weak-spined individual who couldn't save his friends, hasn't saved the goblins either, and yet many have died at his hand, right? Like, through his actions, right? He's done no actual good, and so.
Yep. So this is a super interesting sort of conundrum. There's a lot of drama and conflict in the story, and so bringing the characters into that and giving it its due weight in the campaign will be something that you want to do as a DM. So here come the characters, la-di-da-di-da, not quite sure what they're getting into, either investigating for the sheriff or just investigating because they were told it was there. There are a lot of goblins along the watchtower leading into the place, and they can blow a horn to alert everyone, but the DC for the stealth check to get up to it is pretty low. What did you think overall of the area itself?
Yeah, it's a fun place, right? It's like falling apart due to the weather. It's constantly being sort of repaired and assembled, and so it's this sort of ramshackle makeshift kind of place. The map is really neat. What's weird is that it's trying to, it is trying to address all the possible things. Like, you might just show up to check up on it, in which case, 12 goblins on watchtowers with half cover and could alert more. That can be rough. And if all the goblins attack the characters, that could be pretty brutal, especially if they're 4th level. But there's a lot of here that I like. Probably the characters will not do just a frontal attack, and will find some way to stealth in. So that's kind of neat, and it's a neat place to explore. There are some really fun things. Like, there's a goblin on a warg that when the warg charges you, the goblin falls off and runs away.
Right.
Which is just, that's great, right? Like, that's
perfect.
hilarious to write that in.
Yeah.
Goblin healers with a healing kit and a pet mountain goat. One of them tells fortunes and actually has figured out the chief's secret.
Right.
There's the shield guardians sort of hoisted up on pulleys and levers, and you got to figure out how to like lower it, but then you can't move it because it needs the amulet, which you don't have yet.
Right.
And if you might just walk into the place under this diplomacy thing, which you then go in and have to meet the chief, decide what you're going to do, and possibly extract them, and which the goblins won't like.
Right.
Or you might fight your way trying to kill all the goblins because goblins bad, and then you reach the chief, and the chief goes, wait, and tells you the story, which you might still end up knifing the guy. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And one of the big reasons that the goblin / gnome chief is staying around is because he has this mechanical egg that he's trying to open and he can't. And this is his motivation. He's like, what could be in this? And it's from the nautiloid that crashed. So he's thinking that there's some great treasure in here that he's putting all his effort into. And once you open it, there's a gibbering mouther inside. So it's all for naught anyway, which really goes along well with this whole sort of really weird and funny and bizarre area.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about this place, this would be the best setup. You know, like when someone's character dies and you have to think of how to replace that character.
Yeah.
Like if you could somehow time it that you've murdered one of the characters and they go into this place and the new character is the gnome. Okay. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah. Man, that'd be the best, right?
Yeah.
The best.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say it was in the egg.
That too. But yeah, actually was a little let down by the egg because it's all this hard to open, and you know, if you have a knock spell, and you know, if you save this thing, which weighs 250 pounds and has a panel of flashing lights, and you know, and you take it back, and you're gonna get this thing coming out and attacking you. Okay, all right.
So there's a lot happening, and like I said, you as the DM sort of have to figure out what tact you're going to take and then prepare for whatever the players bring to this chaos. Yeah. See, I would make it something much worse than a gibbering mouther. I would make it something that is going to totally decimate this this whole place. So when they get it open, and then it just comes out and just starts just destroying the whole fort and all the goblins, and you just have to run.
And it just comes falling over, like maybe the whole fort just crashes down the ravine or something
as you're running out of it.
Yeah, that could work.
Cool.
That could be a lot of fun.
Let's do one more. Let's talk about the Lost Spire of Netheril. The tall tale of this area is: did you hear what happened to that evil wizard in East Haven? They tied him to a stake and lit him on fire, and you may have seen it. Why? Because he hired some 10-towners to help him find a buried tower, then killed him to keep its location secret. Well, one of them told me where the tower's at. I wouldn't go myself, but it's maybe something you'd like to explore. Okay. That's a good reason to go somewhere. The quest is a hunt for a red yeti. It's a yeti that's so vicious that its fur is stained red with blood from all of its victims. And if you go to hunt this yeti, you come across the wizard's tower.
Yep.
So what's the story behind it?
Well, the story is really quite awesome. This is a wizard's tower that fell off of a crashing Netherese floating city. And it sank into the snow upside down, which is a great concept. The wizard within died, but its shield guardian dug its way out, trying to find help, creating a tunnel. And then it ended up running out of power, and that's when the goblins found it and hoisted it into their location of Karkalok. And what this does is ties into that whole event we covered earlier, where in Chapter 1, in one of the towns, the first thing you see is witnessing this Red Wizard of Thay being killed at the stake. And what has actually happened is that wizard sent a party to find the ruins of the Netherese city. And they found it and set it up as the base. and returned to East Haven, which is when he got burned alive at the stake, this wizard Zahn. But Zahn had left in the tower his simulacrum. And so the simulacrum lives on, not knowing the fate of the actual real Zahn.
Right.
And that's what set up a really very interesting situation where your enemy could be your friend.
Right. Or you could have seen this red wizard get burned at the stake, then you come here and there he is again.
What?
And what sort of a wild card in this whole thing is there is a white named Kreentas who's acting as a bodyguard for the simulacrum. And it has the task of activating the simulacrum when necessary. So that's sort of something you can play with as the DM. You know, does he just go activate it? Does he threaten to activate it? You know, that's a question that you can play with. And then if you do, then the simulacrum can interact with the PCs as its own separate NPC entity.
The whole place is super creative. I mean, the idea that it's this upside down tower and there's this gorgeous map that shows you what it looked like on the edge of the floating city and then what it looks like upside down in the ice, sort of broken, but joined by the little tunnels that were carved by the shield guardian when it worked its way out. That's really creative. I do think it could use a little more descriptions of everyday objects that are upside down. So what I would recommend is when you run this, make a bullet list of sort of things to point out and you know that are upside down or upended or you know on the ceiling instead of on the you know which is now the floor and just throw a few of those in every room to keep it real, like as they're fighting. Okay, you know you move past an upside down candelabra on the ceiling that is the floor, right, to engage the whatever you're fighting, right? Like just throw in some things like that so that you keep it everyone remembering this place is upside down.
Yeah, it's it has the potential to be a really sort of weird experience when you're doing all this. Part of me wants to change it so while the tower's upside down, there's sort of a gravity thing happening to sort of make it weird, like
to see truly be upside down.
At certain times, the gravity changes and it pulls you up.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
Up to the floor and then changes back down to the ceiling. But yeah, it's something you can tinker with as the DM.
This is also a place that has some really neat lore and lore that sort of piqued my curiosity. Like, oh, why are those topics coming up? So one of them is mention of the Farim, which are these horrible ancient monsters that drove the Netherese Empire to ruin. When Netheril was just huge and was going to be unstoppable, these creatures were battling them and forced them to flee. It's why the host tower of the Arcane is in Luska and all kinds of things like that. So seeing them mentioned in D&D products, kind of like, oh, is something going to come around to, are the Farum going to return, you know? And so that was interesting, that just kind of, and I like as a player, as a DM, to have these sort of books that deal with really ancient, interesting topics. When you find Zahn, he will immediately introduce himself. And so again, that may be really interesting if you saw him die at the stake, and here he is. But he's honest about his goals and tells you of the existence of the larger Netherese city that has crashed in the Ten Towns region in Icewind Dale. And he has the Shield Guard Amulet. He'll give that to you. And what he really wants to do is he wants to be a real boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he wants what all the Arcane Brotherhood want, is just to plunder that city.
But also he wants to become real.
Well, yes. That is true. But at that point, he sort of, I don't know, is real? I don't know.
Well, the thing is, so there's this Rune Chamber that's at the one of the bottom levels. I think it's at the bottom level. But there is a Rune Chamber, and this is a place where if you place an illusion on this disc and you activate this magic disc, something will happen with the illusion, including the possibility of making it permanently real. Right. Because he is a simulacrum, you know, if he dies, he turns into ice. He's not really alive. He's a puppet. in that sense. If he can have the magic activated by somebody, then, which is the characters, he might become real. If he becomes real, he can use the spell book to learn spells, and he can really be Zahn.
Right.
And that's what he wants to do.
Yep.
But he's not allied with the Arcane Brotherhood. In fact, if he becomes permanent, he instructs the characters to take out the other Arcane Brotherhood members, tells you about them, and then says, I'm going to go find this lost Netherese city, at which point he can become a villain. But what's also interesting here is that when you use this magic, it can either destroy the illusion, Zahn dies, transform it into a black pudding, make it temporarily real for 2d12 hours, or permanently real. So there are a number of ways this can play out, which is very interesting.
Yeah. There's a 50-50 chance that he goes away if he turns into a black pudding.
Yeah.
Or just gets destroyed. So get all the information out of him to the players before you roll on this chart, just in case it goes badly.
It goes poorly. One other little bit of lore that I really like is there is a novel included in, I think, the room where they find Zahn, called Here Lies the King. And it has some information there that reminds me of several plots that are in various Sword Coast cities or have played out in Sword Coast cities. And I wonder if that is a new and factual account because it sort of suggests false kingship. So I don't know if that's going to play out over time. There's also a story of a fallen Netherese flying city called Ventatost, which is not a name that I've seen before when I've read various sources, that fell over Cormanthor 2,000 years ago, which is after Mithrandir's created. So I'm not sure what that signifies or leads to, but there are these little pieces of lore in this Lost Spire of Netheril that I just find fascinating. I'm like, oh, is D&D doing something here?
Yeah, maybe they are. Hey, D&D movie confirmed. It's going to take place in Icewind Dale, right? Yeah, and then after all of that, as has been the motif for the other locations, as you leave, a group of bugbears stumbles across the area, and it's basically given to you, run the combat if you want. The bugbear leader doesn't necessarily want to fight. He's more than willing to be bought for 2 gold pieces per day per bugbear to become your servants, or just give them 10 gold pieces each and they'll leave you alone. So yeah, your choice, however you want to run it. It's there. Doesn't really add to the story much unless you want that group of bugbears to become a recurring theme. Then you could have them become, I don't know, part of your franchise.
Yeah.
There you go.
That'd be awesome. I want bugbears in my franchise.
Who doesn't? When we do this again next week, we will continue. We're looking at the Ragged Tribe Camp, Revel's End, Sky Tower Shelter, and Worm Doom Crag.
Woo! We're almost to chapter 3.
We are getting there. So thank you all so much for your support and for listening. You can support our Patreon by going to patreon.com/MMP. If you're a listener and you're on social media, we would really appreciate it if you'd let everyone know that you enjoy the show. We hope at least you enjoy the show. And if for some reason you don't, you can go to our forums at Misdirected Mark, that forums, and you can let us know what we're lacking, and we can make it up to you. So Teos, where can people follow you on social media?
If you did not like this episode, I'm at Sean Merwin on Twitter. Please tell me what you thought. Yes. If you do appreciate this episode, you can find me at AlphaStream and tell me what you liked.
That seems reasonable. So I guess now is where I tell you that my Twitter handle is Sean Merwin. Or you can go to the forums, like I just said, at forums.misdirectedmark.com. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Mr. Abadia, what should we do now?
Let's go kill some monsters with song.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?